Don't respond. Don't argue. Ignore them. 7 dark psychological tactics. Listen carefully. Your primary mistake is the belief that the world functions on the principles of justice, dialogue, and mutual understanding. This is a lie created to keep you under control. In reality, society is a complex ecosystem where dominance is determined not by physical strength, but by the ability to control the psyche of others. You are a biological automaton governed by neurochemical reactions. If you do not learn to master the tools of silence and ignoring, you will forever remain merely a food source for those who understand the rules of the game. I am not here to empathize with your traumas. I am here to dissect the mechanisms of your enslavement and provide you with a scalpel so that you may excise the tumor of external influence. Let us proceed to the first stage of your retraining. Chapter 1. The Vacuum of Silence and the Collapse of Rationality 1. Phase. The Confrontation. An evening in a restaurant with high ceilings. The air is saturated with the scent of expensive perfume and ozone. William sits opposite Chloe. He has just leveled an accusation against her regarding something she did not commit. A small but painful lie about her incompetence in the presence of their mutual acquaintances. Chloe feels heat rising from her neck to her cheeks. Her pupils are dilated. She opens her mouth to present logical arguments, defend her honor, and prove that he is wrong. William slightly raises an eyebrow. On his lips is a barely noticeable, almost contemptuous half-smile. He does not interrupt. He simply watches, intently. In his eyes, there is neither anger nor sympathy, only complete emptiness. But it was not like that at all. I can show you the correspondence. It clearly states... Chloe's voice trembles slightly. She searches for her phone in her bag. Chloe's thoughts. Why is he silent? Does he truly believe this? I must make him understand, otherwise I will lose my mind from this injustice. William takes a slow sip of water without breaking eye contact. He places the glass on the table with a barely audible thud. Silence again. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. He watches her frantic movements like an entomologist watching a fly struggling in a jar. Chloe begins to speak faster. Her arguments become chaotic. She justifies herself for things she is not guilty of, simply to fill this unbearable, heavy silence. 2. Phase. Psychological X-ray. What is occurring at this moment? William is utilizing one of the most destructive tactics, the information vacuum. When one person remains silent in response to the emotional request of another, they create cognitive dissonance. The victim's brain is programmed to complete the stimulus-response cycle. When there is no response, the brain begins to generate hypotheses, and almost all of them are destructive. Neurochemistry. Chloe experiences a sharp release of cortisol and norepinephrine. The absence of feedback is perceived by the amygdala as a direct threat to survival, social exclusion. Attack mechanism. The justification trap. As soon as you begin to prove your innocence, you acknowledge the right of the other person to be your judge. You voluntarily step down to a lower level. William is not attacking her logic. He is attacking her biological need for social validation. 3. Phase. Psychological precedent. In the 1970s, psychologist Edward Tronick conducted an experiment known as the still face experiment. A mother was asked first to play with her infant and then suddenly cease all reaction and maintain an absolutely motionless, expressionless face. The result was shocking. Initially, the child attempted to attract attention through habitual means. However, after only a few minutes of receiving no response, The infant fell into a state of panic, began to cry, turned away, and exhibited signs of profound stress and a collapse of the nervous system. Adults are the same infants with a more complex vocabulary. When your emotional outburst or attempt at dialogue is met with a still face or being ignored, your neocortex shuts down, handing over control to the reptilian brain. You lose your reason. You become manageable. 4. Phase. Counterstrike. If Chloe possessed a strategy, she would have understood. The person who is least interested in the outcome of the conversation holds the most power. Lesson number 1. Never fill the silence created by an aggressor. Make it your ally. Her correct action: stop speaking in the middle of a sentence, lean back in the chair, and look at William in exactly the same way, coldly and searchingly, without anger. As soon as you stop proving yourself, the power shifts to you, because now he must be the one to wonder why his tactic did not work. 5. Phase. Sensory immersion. The air between them became viscous, like cold syrup. The clink of a fork against porcelain can be heard from a neighboring table. The light of the lamp reflects in William's eyes, turning them into 2 flat glass spheres. The second hand of his watch counts down the time of her capitulation. But if she falls silent now, that sound will be louder than any scream. You continue to crave understanding, hoping that knowledge of the mechanisms will bring you peace. That is an error. Knowledge will only provide you with a weapon. If you are not prepared to use it, you will simply become a better informed victim. Let us proceed to the second stage of the vivisection of human weaknesses. Chapter 2. Training by waiting. Interval reinforcement. Phase. The confrontation. A typical apartment in the city center. 3 o'clock in the morning. Arthur lies on the bed. The only source of light is the cold glow of a smartphone screen. He's looking at a dialogue with Olivia. He wrote to her 8 hours ago. A simple question that did not require long consideration. 3 hours ago, the status changed to read. Since then, silence. Arthur feels a dull pulling weight growing in his chest. He refreshes the page again and again. Thoughts. Is she angry? Did I say something wrong? Perhaps she is with someone else. Should I write again to clarify? He begins to type, "Hey, is everything all right?" But immediately deletes it. Micro expressions. His jaws clench so tightly that his masticatory muscles begin to ache. His fingers tremble slightly. At that moment, the phone vibrates. 3 dots. Olivia is typing. Arthur holds his breath. The dots disappear. A minute passes. 2. Nothing. Olivia is sitting in a chair at this time, reading a book. She saw the notification earlier in the day. She consciously opened it so that he would see the red status, then set the phone aside. She knows that right now his brain is working at its limit, burning neural connections in an attempt to solve the reason for her silence. For her, this is an investment in his future loyalty. 2. Phase. Psychological X-ray. One of the most powerful techniques of biological hacking is being applied here: interval reinforcement. Neurochemistry. When you receive a reward, a response predictably, the dopamine level in the brain remains stable. However, when the reward becomes random and unpredictable, the dopamine level skyrockets to critical levels. Arthur's brain is currently in the same state as the brain of a compulsive gambler at a slot machine. The Zeigarnik effect. The human psyche strives to complete any unfinished action. An unclosed dialogue is an open loop in the cognitive system. It consumes a colossal amount of mental energy until it is closed by a response. Cognitive bias. The more time Arthur spends thinking about Olivia's silence, the more valuable she begins to appear to him. His brain makes a logical error. If I am thinking about this so much, it must be incredibly important to me. This is not love. This is a failure in the system of priority assessment. 3. Phase. Psychological precedent. In the mid-20th century, B.F. Skinner conducted a series of experiments with pigeons and rats in so-called Skinner boxes. In the first group, the animal received food every time it pressed a lever, continuous reinforcement. When the food supply stopped, the animal quickly lost interest in the lever. In the second group, food was provided randomly. The animal never knew whether it would receive a portion now or after 10 presses. The result? The animals from the second group became obsessed. They pressed the lever endlessly, ignoring sleep and other needs. The unpredictability of the reaction created a pathological dependency. Olivia is turning Arthur into a laboratory pigeon. Her silence is the absence of food pellets, which forces him to press the lever of attention ever more fiercely. 4. Phase. Counter-strike. The main weakness of this tactic is that it only works until the victim realizes they are being trained. Lesson number 2. Your attention is the currency of the highest denomination. Do not invest it in losing assets. Strategic decision. Radical devaluation. As soon as you feel that you are being made to wait for a response intentionally, turn off the phone. Do not simply refrain from writing, but physically remove the device. Shift your focus to an activity that requires high concentration of the cortex. Complex work, physical exertion. When Olivia finally deigns to respond, you must not react instantly. Your reaction should be dry, brief, and arrive after a period of time 3 times longer than her pause. You must disrupt her reinforcement schedule with your own. 5. Phase. Sensory immersion. In Arthur's room, it smells of stale coffee and dust from a running processor. The blue glow of the screen makes his face look like a death mask. Every rustle outside the window, every sound of a passing car, seems to him to be a notification signal. This is the smell of addiction, the cold, metallic taste of the fear of being unnecessary. And at this time, the silence in her apartment smells of cleanliness and total control. She is not angry with him. She is simply excising his will, using seconds that turn into hours. You are beginning to understand that silence is not the absence of sound. It is a dense, tangible matter that can be used to suffocate. If you thought the previous tactics were cruel, it means you still underestimate the depth of human cunning. We move to the analysis of the mechanism that turns your own brain into your executioner. If you recognized yourself or your past reactions in the described patterns or behaviors of the characters, put a plus in the comments. This is not a sign of weakness, but the first signal that your brain has begun the process of deconstructing old habits. Chapter 3. The Altar of Guilt. Silent Condemnations. Phase. The confrontation. A spacious kitchen in a modern style. The cold shine of stainless steel and granite countertops. Ethan returns home an hour later than usual. He forgot to buy what Grace had asked for. A trifle? For an ordinary person, yes. For a predator, it is an ideal bridgehead for an attack. Grace stands by the window, her back to him. She hears him enter, hears his apologies, but does not move. Ethan. I am sorry, Grace. There was a pile-up at work. That list completely slipped my mind. Let me order delivery right now? His voice sounds pleading. He tries to catch her reflection in the window glass. Grace, maintains absolute immobility. She does not sigh. She does not roll her eyes. She does not scream. She simply continues to look into the darkness outside the window. In her hands is a cup of tea, the steam from which rises slowly. She takes a slow, barely audible sip. Ethan approaches closer. "Grace, are you angry? Please, say something. It is just groceries." He takes a step into her personal space. His shoulders are tense. He expects a blow, a scream, a reproach. But there is no blow. Grace slowly places the cup on the table. The sound of porcelain against granite sounds like a gunshot in this sterile silence. She walks past him into the bedroom without even looking at him. Her shoulder almost brushes his chest, but she physically ignores his presence as if he were transparent air. Ethan remains standing alone in the illuminated kitchen. He begins to go over in his mind not only this evening, but all his mistakes over the past month. Thoughts. It is not about the groceries. I have disappointed her. I am a bad partner. What else did I do wrong? 2. Phase. Psychological X-ray. This is so-called stonewalling, combined with the projection of guilt into a vacuum. Psychology of the process. When a person does not receive a proportionate response to a committed, even if minor, error, a punishment deficit arises in their psyche. The brain searches for a way to close the gestalt. Since Grace does not pass a sentence, Ethan begins to pass it on himself. Neurochemistry. Chronic expectation of a reaction causes a constant release of cortisol. Unlike a sharp burst of anger, this silent stress finds no outlet in action. The fight-or-flight response is blocked. As a result, cortisol begins to destroy the capacity for rational thinking, shifting the brain into a mode of self-flagellation. Attack mechanism. Moral superiority through silence. The one who is silent automatically occupies the position of the judge. The one who tries to engage the silent person in conversation occupies the position of the defendant, begging for mercy. 3. Phase. Psychological precedent. In the 1960s, psychologist Martin Seligman discovered a phenomenon known as learned helplessness. In the course of experiments, dogs were divided into 3 groups. One group was subjected to electric shocks that could be escaped by pressing a panel with their nose. The second group was shocked with current that could not be turned off by any actions. The shock stopped randomly, regardless of the animal's behavior. The result was fatal for the psyche. When the dogs from the second group were moved to an enclosure where stopping the pain simply required jumping over a low barrier, they remained lying and whimpering. They did not even attempt to save themselves. They had become accustomed to the fact that their actions were of no consequence. When Grace uses ignoring in response to any attempts by Ethan to rectify the situation, she is training learned helplessness in him. He ceases to be a subject of the relationship and becomes a broken object that will do anything just to stop this unbearable silence. 4. Phase. Counterstrike. Your empathy is a leash by which you are led to the slaughterhouse. If you feel that your apology was ignored for the purpose of making you suffer, immediately cease the reconciliation dance. Lesson number 3. Your responsibility ends where the manipulation of another person begins. Strategy. Mirror vacuum. As soon as you realize that you are being punished with silence, you must accept these rules of the game with the joy of a predator. No second chances. No, why are you being silent? You simply go about your business. Leave the room. Turn on music. Leave to meet friends. You must show the manipulator that their main weapon, isolation, does not affect you. Moreover, you are enjoying this silence. The manipulator will fall into a rage when they realize that their punishment is a gift to you. 5. Phase. Sensory immersion. In the air hangs the scent of cooling Earl Grey and expensive cleaning agent. The silence in the bedroom where Grace went seems heavy, like a lead blanket. But in the kitchen, under the bright light of the lamps, Ethan takes a breath. He feels the cold of the granite under his palm. He does not follow her. He takes a knife and begins slowly, with surgical precision, to cut an apple. The crunch of the fruit under the blade is the only sound that matters now. He has broken the chain. You have begun to realize that words are merely noise intended to distract attention. The real war is fought in the space between phrases. If you do not control this space, it is controlled for you. We move to the 4th stage, the erasure of the reality of another. Chapter 4. Erosion of reality. Gaslighting through emptiness. 1. Phase. The confrontation. A glass office on the 40th floor. Outside the window, a gray metropolis choking on smog. Liam stands before the desk of Sophia, his manager. He is confident in his rightness. He remembers how a week ago she gave him clear instructions to change the terms of a contract. Liam. Sophia, I have made the edits we agreed upon last Thursday. Here is the report. He places the folder on the desk. His movements are confident. He expects professional recognition. Sophia does not take the folder. She slowly raises her eyes from the monitor. In her gaze is a mixture of slight bewilderment and barely perceptible pity. She remains silent for 5 seconds, forcing Liam to become aware of every extra sound of his own breathing. Sophia, quietly, almost in a whisper, agreed? Last Thursday? She falls silent again. She does not say, I did not say that. She simply leaves the question hanging in the air, as if the very idea of such a conversation was sired by the feverish brain of a subordinate. Liam. Yes, at 14:15, in your office. You also said that the margin was too high. In his voice, a treacherous note of justification appears. Thoughts? I remember this. I wrote it down. Or did I? Perhaps it was another conversation. She is looking at me as if I am insane. Sophia slightly tilts her head to the side, continuing to maintain silence. She does not argue. She simply waits until he destroys his own confidence. She looks at him like a broken mechanism that makes strange sounds. Liam's internal monologue. Her silence weighs a ton. If I continue to insist now, I will look hysterical. But I remember, or am I losing my mind? 2. Phase. Psychological X-ray. This is the highest form of tactical ignoring. Refusal to validate the objective reality of another person. Mechanism. When a person is certain of a fact, but does not receive social confirmation of that fact from a significant figure, authority, a conflict arises in their brain between memory and perception. This causes cognitive dissonance. Neurochemistry. The hippocampus, the memory center, enters the game. Under the influence of stress from Sophia's silent pressure, access to accurate memories is blocked. The brain, striving to survive in a group, begins to adjust memories to the social standard transmitted by the dominant individual through their silence. Terminology. This is silent gaslighting. You are not told that you are lying. You are shown that your words simply do not exist in this reality. 3. Phase. Psychological precedent. Research by Professor Elizabeth Loftus on the construction of false memories proved that human memory is not a video recording, but a text file that can be edited. In one of her experiments, subjects were suggested that, as children, they had been lost in a shopping mall. No evidence was provided. They were simply asked to remember it, creating an atmosphere where the absence of a memory appeared as a strange failure in their own psyche. After some time, 25% of the participants not only remembered the event, but also supplemented it with details that never happened. Sophia uses the same principle. With her silence, she creates an empty space in Liam's memory, which he himself will fill with doubt and lies to regain a sense of normalcy. 4. Phase. Counter-strike. The only way to survive in this game is to stop relying on your senses in the presence of a predator. Lesson number 4. Firm fixation is your only anchor in the storm of another's manipulations. Strategy. Radical documentation. If you are dealing with a person who uses silence to distort facts, never rely on verbal agreements. Liam's countermove. Do not try to remember. Do not justify yourself. He should have said, "I see that you have doubts. I will send you a copy of the protocol of our meeting in a minute." And leave. You must remove evidence from your head into the material world. Paper does not doubt. Paper does not feel the cold of another's eyes. 5. Phase. Sensory immersion. In the office, the air conditioner is working, a barely audible hum that seems deafening in this dead silence. A sunbeam falls on the edge of the desk, illuminating millions of dust particles dancing chaotically in the air. Liam feels that his shirt collar has become too tight. The smell of ozone and expensive paper presses on his temples. Sophia blinks, slowly, like a reptile in the sun. She knows the silence has already begun to corrode his confidence, like acid on metal. Your thirst for knowledge is commendable, but remember, knowledge without application is simply extra garbage in your cognitive apparatus. You have already seen how silence corrodes memory and will. Now we move to how it destroys what you value most, your social self. Chapter 5. Social erasure. Protocol Ghost 1. Phase. The confrontation. A private evening at an elite golf club. The smell of freshly cut grass mixes with the aroma of expensive cognac and Cuban cigars. James is an ambitious startup founder who a week ago committed a strategic error in negotiations with Oliver, the gray eminence of the venture market. James approaches a group of investors, at the center of which stands Oliver. He smiles. His palm is already prepared for a handshake. James. Oliver, good evening. It is a pleasure to see you again. By the way, regarding that question about asset valuation. His voice sounds cheerful, but a barely perceptible vibration slips through it. He is seeking confirmation of his status in this group. Oliver continues telling a story to his interlocutor without interrupting for a single second. His gaze passes through James as if he were merely an annoying distortion of the air. He does not even pause. His body does not turn toward the person who approached. Complete ignore at the level of biological sensors. James freezes with his mouth half open. The investors, seeing Oliver's reaction, or rather, the lack thereof, instantly avert their eyes. At that moment, James ceases to exist for the entire group. James's thoughts. Was I not noticed? No, he definitely saw me. Everyone saw. Now I look like an idiot. I must say something. No, if I repeat myself, I will look like an intrusive beggar. My heart is pounding as if I ran a marathon. Why is it so stifling in here? Oliver finishes his drink, places the glass on the tray of a passing waiter, and, still without looking at James, addresses the group. Gentlemen, let us proceed to the terrace. It has become too crowded in here. They leave. James remains alone. His social status in this room was reset to 0 in 15 seconds. 2. Phase. Psychological X-ray. This is the tactic of demonstrative social exclusion. Biology. For a primate, expulsion from the pack is a death sentence. Your brain reacts to social ignoring with the same centers responsible for physical pain. Neurochemistry. An instantaneous collapse of serotonin levels and a sharp spike in cortisol occurs. The amygdala enters panic mode. At this moment, logic shuts down. You feel small, invisible, and insignificant. Attack mechanism. Oliver did not insult James. He did not argue with him. He simply deprived him of the right to exist in this context. This is the ultimate manifestation of dominance, to decide who is part of reality and who is not. 3. Phase. Psychological precedent. Professor Kip Williams conducted a famous study called Cyberball. The subject played a simple computer game of tossing a ball with 2 other players, who were actually bots. After some time, the bots stopped throwing the ball to the subject and played only with each other. Despite the fact that it was only a primitive game with strangers in a digital space, MRI scans of the participants' brains showed that the area of the anterior cingulate cortex, responsible for physical pain, literally lit up. Ignoring causes real physical suffering. Oliver knows this. He delivers a blow that leaves no bruises on the skin, but maims the psyche. 4. Phase. Counterstrike. Your mistake is that you invest another person with the power to validate your worth. You wait for permission to be here. Lesson number 5. Your presence does not require sanction. Become the center of your own coordinate system. Strategic decision. Frame hijacking. If you are ignored publicly, the worst thing you can do is freeze or begin to fuss. James's correct action. At the very second he realized Oliver was erasing him. He should have turned to any other person, even the waiter, and begun a confident, dominant conversation on another topic. Or simply, calmly and with a slight smirk, taken out his phone and made it appear as if he had received an important message. You must show that Oliver's silence is his personal communication problem, not your disappearance. If you do not acknowledge your exile, it does not occur. 5. Phase. Sensory immersion. The air on the terrace smells of damp earth and expensive tobacco. The ice in the glasses nearby clinks like small crystal guillotines. James feels sweat chilling his back under his silk shirt. The silence that Oliver left behind seems sticky and black, like tar. But if he straightens his shoulders now and takes a breath of air as if he were the master here, that tar will simply slide off him without leaving a trace. You continue to walk this path, hoping to find the bottom of the abyss. But the abyss has no bottom. It only has levels of depth. If you thought social exile was the limit, prepare for how silence is used to eviscerate your consciousness and force you to voluntarily surrender all your vulnerabilities. We proceed to the 6th stage, turning silence into a confessional. Chapter 6. The Open-Ended Trap. Confession into the Void 1. Phase. The Confrontation. The twilight of a living room. The only source of light is a floor lamp in the corner, casting long, broken shadows on the walls. Daniel sits on the sofa. His body is tense like a coiled spring. Opposite him, in a deep armchair, Evelyn has positioned herself. Daniel has just finished justifying his small lie regarding finances. He delivered a prepared version that was supposed to close the matter. Daniel. And that is all, Evelyn. Simply a misunderstanding with the banking app. Now you know everything. He falls silent, waiting for her reaction. Anger, a scream, anything that would allow him to move to a counterattack. Evelyn does not move. She slightly tilts her head, looking at him with an expression of soft, almost sympathetic expectation. She does not say, "I do not believe you." She says nothing at all. She simply waits. 30 seconds pass, a minute. The silence in the room becomes physically heavy, like a mass of water. Daniel begins to feel an itch under his skin. Daniel, you do not believe me? Well, I can show the statements. Although there was one more transaction. But it is not important. He falls silent, but Evelyn continues to remain silent, slightly raising an eyebrow. This gesture is like a vacuum pump, pulling words out of him. Daniel, listen, in reality, there was a bit more money. I just did not want to upset you because back then in Marseille, he begins to tell things he swore never to utter. He fills the silence with his secrets, hoping to buy her forgiveness, or at least her voice. Evelyn smiles slightly with the corner of her lips, still without uttering a word. She simply watches as he opens his own veins. 2. Phase, psychological X-ray. This is a classic technique of information deprivation in personal communication. Psychology of filling the void. The human brain is evolutionarily tuned to dialogue as an exchange. When you provide information and receive emptiness in return, an open loop effect arises. To close it, you begin to provide increasingly intimate and dangerous information, hoping to find that key that will force the interlocutor to react. Neurochemistry. Waiting for a reaction under conditions of uncertainty causes a sharp spike in adrenaline. When a person begins to speak, to confess, a short-term release of tension occurs, a micro-release of oxytocin or endorphins, bringing an illusory relief. The predator simply waits until you anesthetize yourself with your own secrets. Terminology. Active listening through absence. You use the anxiety of another as a tool for interrogation. 3. Phase, psychological precedent. Psychologist Saul Kassin, a leading expert on the psychology of interrogations, conducted an experiment with a computer breakdown. Students were asked to enter data, having been warned that pressing the ALT key would lead to a fatal crash. In the middle of the test, the computer simulated a breakdown. Initially, all students denied that they had pressed the key. However, when the experimenter used tactics of pressure and long pauses, forcing the subjects to sit in silence and reflect on what they had done, more than 60% of the participants not only signed a confession for something they did not do, but also began to remember details of exactly how their fingers slipped onto the forbidden key. Evelyn is doing the same thing to Daniel. She is not accusing him. She is creating a space in which his own psyche begins to fabricate guilt and surrender hidden information to stop the torture of uncertainty. 4. Phase, counter-strike. If you catch yourself speaking too much simply to interrupt an awkward silence, you have lost. Lesson number 6. The silence of the interlocutor is not a question. It is their problem, not yours. Strategic decision. The point of no return. If you have finished your thought and the interlocutor continues to remain silent while looking at you, fall silent in response. Look them straight in the eyes. Do not avert your gaze. Do not fidget with your fingers. Count to 10 in your head. If the pause lingers, use a closing phrase. I have said everything I wanted to say. If you have questions, ask them. If not, I am finished. You must return the ball to their side of the field. The one who breaks and speaks first after this phrase will find themselves in a subordinate position. Witsbu. Phase. Sensory immersion. In the room, it smells of cooling candle wax and the old leather of the armchair. The ticking of the wall clock turns into hammer blows on an anvil. Daniel feels his palms becoming damp and his mouth becoming dry. Every word he utters seems extra to him, but he cannot stop. Evelyn sits motionless, like a marble statue. In her pupils, the light of the floor lamp is reflected, making them look like 2 gold pennies. She's not listening to his words. She's listening to the rhythm of his fear. And that rhythm tells her everything she wanted to know. You have reached the equator of your training. By this moment, you should have realized. Silence is a mirror. The one who looks into it first sees their fears in it. The one who forces the other to look into it longer wins. But what will happen if you encounter someone who knows these rules? How do you win in a duel of 2 voids? Chapter 7. The Reflected Abyss. The Art of Mirror Ignoring One. Phase. The Confrontation. An office paneled with dark wood. Outside the window, a wall of downpour, turning the city into a blurred gray spot. Nathan, a man accustomed to breaking the will of subordinates with a single movement of an eyebrow, sits behind a massive desk. Opposite him is Maya. She has come to demand a revision of the terms of a deal that Nathan considered closed. Maya. Nathan, current figures do not account for inflationary risks. We demand an increase in the share by 15%. Her voice is steady, devoid of pleading intonations. She places her palms on the desk, openly but firmly. Nathan slowly leans back in his chair. He does not respond. He looks at her with that very heavy expression that usually causes people to begin to fuss, adjust their tie, or offer a compromise even before the dispute begins. He turns on his signature vacuum. Maya's internal monologue. He is doing it again, trying to make me feel out of place. Seconds are ticking. 1, 2, 3. I feel my heart wanting to accelerate, but I slow my breathing. I will not give him this reaction. I will become his reflection. Maya, instead of continuing to speak or averting her gaze, she mirrors his posture. She also slowly leans back in her chair. She copies the tilt of his head. She looks him straight in the bridge of his nose, not in the eyes, but slightly above, creating the effect of a cold X-ray gaze. She falls silent. Complete, absolute silence. 3 minutes pass. In the office, only the steady ticking of an antique clock and the sound of the rain can be heard. Nathan begins to feel discomfort. His weapon has not simply failed to work, it has turned against him. Now he sits in the silence he himself created, but he is not the one controlling it. Nathan, for the first time during the meeting, he clears his throat. His hand involuntarily reaches for a pen on the desk. Nathan's thoughts. Why is she not flinching? What does she know that I do not? This pause has lingered. This already looks foolish on my part. Nathan. Very well, Maya. Suppose, what are your arguments? He spoke first. He lost the round. 2. Phase. Psychological X-ray. Here, the effect of neutralization through mirroring has worked. Psychology of dominance. In a social hierarchy, the one who breaks the silence acknowledges their need for communication. When Maya mirrors Nathan's behavior, she deprives him of the monopoly on coldness. Neurochemistry. A program failure occurs in Nathan's brain. His brain expected a burst of cortisol in the victim, which he could read from her facial expressions. Instead, he sees his own composure returned back to him. This causes cognitive stupor in him. His prefrontal cortex begins to frantically search for a new strategy, which inevitably leads to a loss of control. Terminology: psychological aikido. You do not resist the pressure of silence. You use its mass to topple the opponent. 3. Phase: psychological precedent. In 1999, psychologists Tanya Chartrand and John Bargh described a phenomenon known as the chameleon effect. They proved that people unconsciously copy the postures and gestures of their interlocutor to establish rapport, connection. However, in a conflict situation, conscious mirror ignoring creates the opposite effect, the uncanny valley effect. When you copy the coldness of a manipulator, they stop feeling like the hunter and begin to feel like the prey encountered with something incomprehensible and potentially dangerous. You deprive them of predictability, and for the brain of a predator, this is the greatest stress. 4. Phase: counter-strike. The person who knows how to mirror emptiness becomes invulnerable to any psychological attacks based on ignoring. Lesson number 7. When the abyss looks into you, become a mirror. Let the abyss see itself in you and be horrified. Strategy: synchronous pause. If someone attempts to out-silence you, do nothing extra. 1. Adopt the posture of the aggressor, with a delay of 2 to 3 seconds. 2. Direct your gaze at a point between their eyes. 3. Mentally begin to read any complex poem or solve a mathematical problem. This will occupy your neocortex and prevent the amygdala from triggering a fear response. Your task is to make the manipulator feel that their silence is their own cage. 5. Phase: sensory immersion. The air in the office smells of old paper, ozone from the storm, and expensive tobacco. The silence between Nathan and Maya is sharp like a razor blade. A raindrop can be heard breaking against the glass. Maya feels the cold of the leather seat and the warmth of her own breath. She's motionless. She is a rock. And she sees how Nathan's eyelid twitched almost imperceptibly. In this sterile void, this micro-gesture is equal to capitulation. She is one without uttering a word. The world you knew has ceased to exist. Now you understand. Behind every unanswered message, behind every heavy pause, and behind every cold gaze, stands not a coincidence, but a biological algorithm. Silence is a vacuum, and nature abhors a vacuum. The one who creates this vacuum forces others to fill it with their blood, secrets, and dignity. Reaction is weakness. As soon as you open your mouth to justify yourself or prove your worth, you acknowledge another's right to judge you. You voluntarily put on a collar. Ignoring is the highest form of power. It is the act of a demiurge who decides who in their reality possesses the right to existence, and who is merely annoying noise on the airwaves. You can no longer afford the luxury of being sincere or understandable. In the food chain of social predators, you are either the one who holds the pause or the one whom the pause suffocates. Your new rule of life: the one who least needs an answer always dictates the terms of the deal. Knowledge of the mechanisms of the psyche is your primary freedom. Subscribe to explore the hidden facets of human behavior together, and be sure to write in the comments which psychological pattern or strategy we should analyze next time. Let us seek the truth together.